Scary telling.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The town square, which had been bustling with life just a day ago, was now a scene of absolute horror. Blood stained the walls, furniture was in shambles, and body parts were strewn about. It was like something out of a nightmare. I had to find survivors. I had to help them. But as I searched the town, I found no one alive. The once prosperous village was now completely deserted, except for me and the creatures that had caused this massacre. I was about to give up hope when I heard a low growl coming from behind me. I turned around to face the giant wolf who had freed me from my bonds the day before. His eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity, and I knew that he was not happy to see me. "You broke your promise," the wolf growled. "You were not meant to know." I backed away slowly as the wolf approached me. I knew there was no escape. But then, something in me snapped. I was tired of running. I was tired of being afraid. I wanted to know the truth about what had happened in this cursed village. "Why?" I asked the wolf. "Why did this happen?" The wolf bristled, and I thought he was going to attack me. But then, he spoke in a voice that was both human and animal. The village paid a steep price for its prosperity. For generations, a child was sacrificed every year to keep the curse at bay. But as the years went on, the curse grew stronger. It demanded more sacrifices. And now, the curse has claimed the entire village. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could a village be so blind to the horrors it was perpetuating? But why didn't anyone try to stop it? I asked. Why didn't anyone say anything? The wolf looked at me with an expression that was both sad and angry. "Because they were afraid," he said. "Afraid of what would happen if they didn't make the sacrifice. Afraid of the curse that would befall them if they spoke out. Afraid of the wolf who protected them for 100 years. I felt a pang of guilt. I had been just like them. I had been afraid of the wolf, afraid of the curse. But now, I wanted to know more. I wanted to understand. Can't we do something?" I asked the wolf. "Can't we break the curse?" The wolf looked at me with an expression of pity. "It is too late for this village," he said. "But perhaps, if you remember what you have seen here, you can prevent it from happening elsewhere." With that, the wolf disappeared into the forest, leaving me alone in the desolate village. I knew that I would never forget what I had seen, and that the curse of Strawberry Village would haunt me for the rest of my days. Years passed since the Strawberry Village massacre, but the memory of that cursed place never left me. I moved away, hoping that a change of scenery would help me forget, but the horrors of that day haunted me still. Every night, I was plagued by nightmares of the massacre, and I could feel the wolf's presence watching me from afar. The memories consumed me. I found myself isolating from the world, avoiding human contact at all costs. The constant feeling of being watched was overwhelming, and I knew that the curse of Strawberry Village was not yet done with me. One night, as I sat in my darkened living room, I heard a low growl coming from outside. My heart rate quickened, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew that sound all too well. Slowly, I made my way to the window and peered through the blinds. The sight before me was both terrifying and familiar. The giant wolf stood outside, staring at me with his glowing eyes. I froze, not knowing what to do. I knew that the wolf had come to collect his debt. I had broken my promise, and I was about to pay the price. Suddenly, the wolf spoke to me, his voice a low rumble in the night. "You cannot run from the curse, nor can you hide. It will follow you until the end of your days. But perhaps there is a way to end it." I was confused. How could there be a way to end the curse? The wolf continued, "You know the truth about what happened in Strawberry Village. You know the price of prosperity. But others do not. Spread the word. Warn others of the curse before it's too late. Only then will the curse be lifted." I knew that the wolf was right. I had to warn others. I couldn't let what happened in Strawberry Village happen again. The wolf vanished into the darkness, leaving me with a newfound sense of purpose. I spent the next few years traveling, telling anyone who would listen about the curse of Strawberry Village. At first, people didn't believe me. They thought I was crazy or that I had made up the story. But over time, I found people who did believe me. People who had seen the horrors of the curse in their own villages. Together, we formed a group dedicated to spreading the word and stopping the curse before it was too late. It was a difficult road. We faced ridicule, skepticism, and even violence. But we persisted. And slowly, we began to see change. Villages started to question their traditions. They began to see the price of their prosperity and the horrors of their past. They started to listen to us, to understand what had happened in Strawberry Village, and to make changes. The curse was not broken overnight, but over time, it weakened. Villages stopped making sacrifices, and the curse began to fade. And finally, after years of hard work, we succeeded. The curse of Strawberry Village was no more. The price of prosperity was no longer paid in blood. And I knew that, in some small way, I had made a difference. I still thought about the horrors I had seen in Strawberry Village, but now they no longer haunted me. Instead, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had helped to end the curse, and that was something to be proud of. It had been years since I last saw the giant wolf. The curse of Strawberry Village was long gone, and I had spent my time traveling, warning others of the dangers of blind tradition and the true cost of prosperity. But one day, as I sat in a quiet tavern, I saw a pair of glowing eyes outside the window. My heart stopped as I realized who it was. The giant wolf had returned. I knew what I had to do. I had to face the wolf and end this curse once and for all. I followed the wolf out into the night, feeling a sense of dread and determination wash over me. As I approached the wolf, he spoke to me in a voice that was both human and animal. "I have watched you, and I have seen your courage. I have seen the change you have brought about in this world, and I am proud of you. But still, the curse of Strawberry Village remains. It is time to end it." I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. The wolf attacked me, and I fought back with everything I had. But I knew that I was outmatched. The wolf was too powerful, too quick. I was losing the fight. But then, I remembered what the wolf had said to me all those years ago. The only way to break the curse was to sacrifice myself. In a moment of selflessness, I offered myself to the wolf. The wolf hesitated, his glowing eyes softening for a moment. "You would do this?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "If it means ending the curse, then I am willing to do it." The wolf accepted my sacrifice, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The curse of Strawberry Village was finally broken, and I knew that my sacrifice had been worth it. As I lay dying, I saw the wolf transform into a human figure. He approached me, a look of sadness on his face. "I am sorry for what I have done," he said, "for the curse I have placed on this world. But you have given me hope. You have shown me that change is possible, that the cycle of violence can be broken. Thank you for your sacrifice." And with those words, I passed into the great beyond, content in the knowledge that I had made a difference. The curse of Strawberry Village was no more, and I knew that my sacrifice would be remembered for generations to come. I always thought that Elmwood was a perfect little town. It was small, quiet, and everyone knew everyone else. But all that changed when the little girl started complaining about the water. At first, I thought she was just being difficult. But then more people started to notice the difference in taste, and soon the whole town was in a panic. People say you can't taste water, but they're wrong. Water has a subtle flavor, and when it's not right, you can tell. The little girl refused to drink or bathe in the water until it had been boiled for hours and distilled. And when I tried it myself, I could see why. There was something off about the taste, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. But it wasn't just the taste of the water that was off. The plants in town were growing in strange ways, and the animals were acting oddly too. I remember seeing horses that had always been affectionate buck off their riders, and dogs that would stand in the yard and stare at nothing for hours on end. It was like they knew something that we didn't. As the days turned into weeks, more and more people fell ill. At first, it was just a few people here and there, but soon it seemed like everyone was getting sick. I remember going to visit my friend Mary and finding her lying in bed, weak and pale. She had always been healthy before, and it was like something was draining the life out of her. Despite the growing sense of dread, no one could explain what was happening. The government sent a team of scientists to investigate, but they couldn't find anything wrong with the water supply. They took samples, ran tests, and checked everything they could think of, but they came up empty-handed. I remember the night when we got the news about the barrier. It was like a scene from a horror movie. The scientists burst into the town hall, shouting about an invisible barrier that was surrounding the town. They said that the barrier was poisoning us, and that there was no way out. At first, I couldn't believe it. But then I looked around and saw the sick and dying people, the empty streets, and the sense of despair that hung over the town like a shroud. The barrier was real, and it was killing us. I remember sitting in my house that night, staring out the window at the barrier that I couldn't see. It was like a prison, trapping us in a town that was slowly killing us. The water tasted different, but plants were growing in strange ways, and the animals were acting oddly. But worst of all, people were dying, and no one could explain why. As I sat there, I realized that this was just the beginning. The barrier was just the first sign of something much larger and much more terrifying. And as I sipped my water, I knew that I was tasting the subtle flavor of death. The days turned into weeks, and the town of Elmwood became a ghost town. The people who were left were sick, dying, and terrified. As the sickness spread, panic began to grip the town. The government sent a team of scientists to investigate, but they were unable to find anything wrong with the water supply. They tested the water, the soil, and the air, but they found nothing that could explain what was happening to the town. That was until they discovered an invisible barrier surrounding the town. The scientists told us that the barrier was slowly poisoning everyone in the town. There was no way out, and there was no cure. The only thing we could do was wait for the end to come. At first, we didn't believe them. We thought that they were mistaken, or that they were trying to cover something up. But as the days turned into weeks, and the sickness spread, we realized that they were telling the truth. The barrier was all around us, but we couldn't see it. It was like a wall that surrounded the town, cutting us off from the rest of the world. We were trapped, and there was no escape. The panic that had gripped the town before was nothing compared to what we felt now. We hoarded supplies and huddled in our homes, waiting for the end to come. Some people tried to leave, but they never came back. We realized that the barrier was keeping us in, and that there was no way out. As the sickness spread, people began to die. It started with the elderly and the sick, but soon it was spreading to everyone. I remember going to visit my friend Mary again, only to find that she had passed away. It was like something was slowly draining the life out of everyone in town. The scientists tried everything they could think of to break the barrier, but nothing worked. They tried bombs, drills, and even chemical solutions, but the barrier was impenetrable. It was like we were in a giant terrarium, being slowly poisoned by something we couldn't see. As the weeks turned into months, the town became more and more deserted. The people who were left were sick, dying, and terrified. We could hear the sounds of people screaming in the night, and the smell of death was everywhere. I remember sitting in my house, staring out the window at the barrier that surrounded the town. I knew that there was no escape, and that we were all going to die. It was like something out of a nightmare, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. As the days passed, I felt myself growing weaker and weaker. The subtle taste of death was always there, reminding me that my time was running out. I knew that the end was near, and that there was nothing I could do to stop it. The barrier was all around us, and it was slowly killing us all. Months passed, and the town of Elmwood became a ghost town. The only people left were the sick, the dying, and the terrified. We knew that there was no escape, and that the end was near. The scientists had tried everything they could think of to break the barrier, but nothing worked. The barrier was impenetrable, and it was slowly killing us all. We could hear the sounds of people screaming in the night, and the smell of death was everywhere. As the weeks turned into months, the town became more and more deserted. The people who were left were sick, dying, and terrified. We knew that there was no hope for us, and that the end was near. I remember sitting in my house, staring out the window at the barrier that surrounded the town. I could feel myself growing weaker and weaker, and I knew that I didn't have much time left. The subtle taste of death was always there, reminding me that my time was running out. One day, I woke up and realized that I was the last person left in the town. Everyone else had either died or fled, leaving me alone with the barrier that was slowly killing me. I sat there for hours, staring at the barrier that surrounded the town. I knew that there was no escape, and that the end was near. I could hear the sounds of people screaming in the night, and the smell of death was everywhere. As the days passed, I felt myself slipping away. The subtle taste of death was always there, reminding me that my time was running out. I knew that the end was near, and that there was nothing I could do to stop it. And then, it happened. I felt a pain in my chest, and I knew that my time had come. I sat there, waiting for the end to come, knowing that there was nothing I could do to stop it. As I took my last breath, I thought about the town that I had once known. It had been a perfect little town, with crystal clear water and friendly people. But now, it was a ghost town, surrounded by an invisible barrier that was slowly killing everyone who lived there. And as I slipped away, I knew that this was just the beginning. The barrier was still out there, surrounding the entire planet, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The end was near, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. I never believed in government warnings or news reports. To me, they were just scare tactics used to keep people in line. So when I first heard about the asteroid heading towards Earth, I didn't give it a second thought. I felt safe in the knowledge that NASA was taking care of the problem and that the asteroid would be deflected. But as the days passed, I started to notice signs of panic and fear around my neighborhood. People were stockpiling supplies and acting like the end of the world was near. My husband, who had always been a worrier, was becoming increasingly anxious about the asteroid and its potential impact on our lives. I tried to reassure him that everything would be okay, but he wasn't convinced. He kept saying that the asteroid was too big and that there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. I brushed off his concerns, telling him that NASA would handle the situation and that we had nothing to worry about. One day, I was out for a walk when I stumbled upon a group of amateur astronomers gathered in a nearby field. They were discussing the asteroid and its potential impact on Earth. I listened in for a while, trying to make sense of what they were saying. One of the astronomers noticed me and called out to me. "Don't listen to them," he said, gesturing to the other astronomers. "They don't know what they're talking about. We're all gonna be okay." I didn't know what to make of his words, but I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Maybe things weren't as bad as they seemed. Maybe the asteroid was just a minor threat that would be easily dealt with. I went home feeling a little better, convinced that my husband's fears were unfounded. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. People were still acting like the end of the world was near, and my husband's anxiety was becoming increasingly worse. I wanted to believe that everything would be okay, but I couldn't ignore the signs around me. I started doing my own research into the asteroid, trying to make sense of the conflicting reports. Some sources were saying that the asteroid would miss Earth entirely, while others were saying that it was on a collision course. I didn't know what to believe. One day, I saw a group of people looting a nearby store. They were taking everything they could get their hands on, and I realized that the situation was worse than I had thought. It was like a switch had been flipped, and people were starting to panic. I went home and started stockpiling supplies, just in case. My husband thought I was overreacting, but I didn't care. I wanted to be prepared for the worst-case scenario, no matter how unlikely it seemed. As the days passed, the news reports started getting more and more dire. The asteroid was on a collision course with Earth, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. I tried to remain calm, telling myself that we would be okay. But deep down, I knew that the worst was yet to come. My husband's anxiety was getting worse with each passing day. He would spend hours glued to the television, watching news reports and scouring the internet for any new information about the asteroid. I tried to reassure him that everything would be okay, but I could tell that he didn't believe me. I started noticing other strange things happening around me. My neighbors were stockpiling supplies like the apocalypse was imminent. People were acting like the end of the world was near, and it was starting to weigh on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I started to do my own research into the asteroid, trying to make sense of the conflicting reports. Some sources were saying that the asteroid would miss Earth entirely, while others were saying that it was on a collision course. I didn't know what to believe. One day, I was out for a walk when I saw a group of people gathered in a nearby field. They were huddled around a telescope, whispering to each other in hushed tones. I felt a sense of unease wash over me as I watched them. Suddenly, one of the amateur astronomers spotted me and called out to me. "Don't listen to them," he said, gesturing to the other astronomers. "They don't know what they're talking about. We're all gonna be okay." I didn't know what to make of his words. On the one hand, I wanted to believe that everything would be okay. But on the other hand, I couldn't ignore the signs around me. People were acting like the end of the world was near, and it was starting to weigh on me. I went home feeling more confused than ever. My husband's anxiety was starting to take a toll on our relationship. He was becoming increasingly paranoid and anxious, and it was causing tension between us. The news reports weren't helping either. They were getting more and more dire with each passing day. The asteroid was on a collision course with Earth, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. I started stockpiling supplies, just in case. My husband thought I was overreacting, but I didn't care. I wanted to be prepared for the worst-case scenario, no matter how unlikely it seemed. As the days passed, I started to feel like I was living in a false sense of security. I had convinced myself that everything would be okay, but I couldn't ignore the signs around me. People were acting like the end of the world was near, and it was starting to weigh on me. I started to wonder if there was something that NASA wasn't telling us. Maybe the asteroid was bigger than they were letting on. Maybe they didn't have a plan to stop it. Maybe we were all doomed. My husband's anxiety was at an all-time high. He was convinced that the asteroid was going to hit us and that there was nothing we could do to stop it. I tried to reassure him that everything would be okay, but I could tell that he didn't believe me. The days turned into weeks, and the asteroid drew closer. I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The day the asteroid hit, I was caught off guard. I had been expecting a near miss or a deflection, but the impact was catastrophic. The sky turned dark, and the ground shook beneath my feet. I watched in horror as buildings crumbled and people ran for their lives. In the chaos, I lost track of my husband and was left to navigate the ruins of the city alone. As the days passed, I realized that the world had been forever changed. Food and water were scarce, and people were turning on each other to survive. I struggled to find a sense of normalcy in a world that had been destroyed. The first few days after the asteroid hit were the hardest. I was alone and scared, unsure of what to do next. But as time went on, I started to encounter other survivors who were also struggling to survive in this new world. I learned to scavenge for food and water to avoid the looters and bandits who roamed the streets. I learned to band together with other survivors, to share resources and to work together to rebuild what was left of our world. But it wasn't easy. Every day was a battle for survival. Every day, I had to fight for food, for water, for shelter. Every day, I had to remind myself that the world had been forever changed, that things would never be the same again. I encountered people who had turned to violence, who had given up hope and had turned on their fellow survivors. I encountered people who had lost everything, who had lost their homes, their families, their entire lives. But I also encountered people who had found hope in this new world. People who had banded together to form communities, to work together to rebuild what was left of our world. People who had found strength in each other, who had refused to give up hope. As time went on, I started to adapt to this new world. I learned to live with the constant threat of danger, to be on guard at all times. I learned to find joy in the small things, to appreciate the beauty that still existed in this world. And as I looked around me, at the community of survivors who had become my family, I realized that there was still hope. That even in the darkest of times, there was still hope for a better tomorrow. That even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, humanity could still endure.